Okay, let's look at question 1 and question 2. They are 1 and 2 marks respectively. They both test the same assessment objective, which is to identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. The intention of these questions is to introduce candidates gently to the paper and also to introduce an element of success. The majority of candidates do score on that first question and most get at least 1 mark on the second question. And that's a deliberate feature of the paper. In terms of my advice to you before we look is that it's about reading the passage very carefully. Take your time, and as you read the passage, highlight and annotate what you think are the key features that you're going to refer to in your answers. Also, the first 3 questions specify line references, so I would suggest that you highlight which lines relate to which question. If candidates are unsuccessful on question 1 and question 2, it's usually for one of 2 reasons. One is that they make an incorrect selection, and that's to do with whether they've read the question carefully, so you can highlight the key words in the question. And the other reason is that they choose evidence, they choose a part of the passage which is outside the designated line references. And as markers, remember this is you as a marker helping your students, it's really important that you know what the designated line references are so that you're not tempted to award a mark which would actually not get 1 in the real examination itself. Okay, so shall we look at some student answers? The question is, from lines 1 to 2, identify a word or phrase which shows how Emmy feels. Okay, in terms of the possible answers, really there are only 2 possible answers, which are either wild or despair-stricken, and it's not surprised that our successful candidates have largely chosen the same answer. Shall we look at some answers? So, as we can see, script 1 has chosen and directly quoted despair-stricken, which is in the mark scheme. Script 2 also chooses exactly the same. Remember that there are only 2 lines to choose from. There's very little text here for them to actually make the selection from. And if we can look at script 3 together just for a moment, yes, it has the same answer, which is correct, and it's awarded 1 mark, but also you can see how this answer has highlighted the key words of the question, which has helped the candidate to focus. Because as we look at the unsuccessful answers, we'll see the reasons why they weren't successful. So if we look at script 4, script 4 has longing and pity. Now, those are words from lines 1 and 2, however, they don't relate to Amelia, they relate to George, and therefore that's incorrect. And similarly, script 5 chooses a different text, also from lines 1 to 2, inexpressible pangs. But that also relates to George rather than Amelia, and therefore it doesn't secure a mark. Okay, shall we move on to question 2? As we said, question 2 assesses the same assessment objective, but now there are 2 marks available. The other key thing to note, of course, is that there's a wider range of lines that's specified, and once again, it's absolutely vital that as students and as markers that you know where to choose your answers from. The key difference in question 2 is that rather than direct quotations, students are now able to use their own words to rephrase part of the answer. So they can use their own words as part of the answer. And we've got some examples. Let's have a look at some, shall we? So, if we look at script 1, question 2, the question here now is from lines 4 to 15, give 2 ways in which George and Amelia, or Emmy, show their feelings of helplessness. You may use your own words or quotations from the text. So, this candidate's identified powerless and torn with pity as the first part of the answer, and looking on mutely as his packing proceeded. Both of these are correct answers. Also, just while we're looking at the paper, note the layout of the paper, that the use of question number 1 and number 2 are there to encourage candidates to make sure they choose 2 sections from the paper. They don't necessarily have to write them in both of those, but it's a structure that's there to help. So this candidate, this student gets 2 marks. Okay, let's have a look at script 2. Script 2, we have powerless and torn with pity, and speechless misery. Now we have one that relates to George, one that relates to Amelia. Both are correct, and both this one also scores 2 marks. Okay, script 3. As I say, there were very few students on this one that didn't score full marks, but this one has, he stood for a moment and looked at her. Now, this is incorrect. The question is asking about feelings of helplessness. It's the words that come after that section which the student needed to include in order to get the mark. But no means to soothe and comfort this helpless, speechless misery. For the second one, gets a mark. So this one actually gets 1 mark rather than 2.